The bridge of the UES Valiant hummed with the quiet efficiency of a ship on routine patrol. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison stood near the navigation console, watching the stars drift past on the main view screen. The outer rim was peaceful tonight, just the way he liked it. 3 years of patrolling this sector had taught him to appreciate the calm moments between the chaos. "Sir, I'm picking up something strange on the long-range communications array," called out Maria Rodriguez from her station. The communications officer had been with the Valiant since its launch, and Jake trusted her instincts completely. "What kind of strange?" Jake asked, moving toward her station. The rest of the bridge crew turned their attention to the conversation. Sensing something important was happening, Maria adjusted her headset and frowned at the displays in front of her. "It's a distress signal, but not from any human vessel. The frequency is all wrong and the language, it's not in our databases." Captain Lisa Hayes emerged from her ready room, having overheard the conversation. She was a veteran of the Centauri conflicts, and her experience showed in the way she carried herself. "Put it through the universal translator and see what we get." The speakers crackled to life, and a voice filled the bridge. It was clearly alien, with tones and inflections that no human throat could produce. The universal translator worked overtime, converting the strange sounds into broken English. "This is Zephyrian Colony Kepler 442b, requesting immediate assistance from any vessel in range. We are under threat of invasion by the Korthic Empire. Our world has no defensive capabilities. We are a peaceful people with no knowledge of warfare. The Korthic fleet will arrive in approximately 72 hours. We estimate 3.2 billion inhabitants will be at risk. Please, anyone who can hear this message... we need help." The bridge fell silent. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard about the Korthic Empire from intelligence reports, but they operated in a completely different sector of space. They were known for their aggressive expansion and their treatment of conquered species. "How far out are we from their position?" Captain Hayes asked. "About 18 hours at maximum warp," replied the navigation officer, Ben Clark. "But Captain, we're just one ship. What can we do against an entire invasion fleet?" Hayes stood quietly for a moment, processing the information. Jake could see the wheels turning in her mind. The Valiant was a decent ship, but she was built for exploration and patrol duty, not major combat operations. "Maria, can you get more information about the Korthic fleet? Numbers, ship types, anything?" Maria worked at her console, trying to extract more data from the alien transmission. "The signal is weak, but I'm picking up fragments of other communications. It sounds like they're dealing with a massive fleet, Captain. Dozens of ships, maybe more." Ryan Foster, the chief engineer, spoke up from his station. "Captain, I've been monitoring our systems. We're in good shape for extended operations, but against a fleet that size..." "I know, Ryan," Hayes said, "but we can't just ignore this. These people are going to be slaughtered." Jake stepped forward. "Captain, what if we don't go alone?" Hayes turned to him, raising an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "The humanitarian fleet. Protocol," Jake said. "It's been in the books for decades, but it's never been used. If we encounter a situation where innocent lives are at risk from an external threat, we're authorized to call for immediate assistance from any available human vessels." The captain's eyes lit up. "That's right. And not just any vessels, but a full response force?" She turned to Maria. "Get me a direct line to Earth Command, Priority Alpha. And while you're at it, send out a general alert to all human vessels in surrounding sectors." As Maria worked to establish communications, Jake pulled up the Humanitarian Fleet Protocol on his console. He had studied it during his academy days, but like most officers, he never expected to use it. The protocol was designed for exactly this type of situation, when humanity encountered a species facing extinction at the hands of an aggressive force. "Captain, I have Admiral Sullivan at sole command," Maria announced. The main screen shifted to show a stern-faced woman in her 50s. Admiral Kate Sullivan was a legend in the human fleet, known for her tactical brilliance and her unwavering commitment to protecting human interests. "Captain Hayes, I understand you have a situation." Admiral Sullivan said without preamble. Yes, Admiral. We've received a distress call from an alien species called the Zephyrians. They're facing invasion by the Korthic Empire, and they have no defensive capabilities. We're looking at potential genocide of over 3 billion beings. Sullivan's expression didn't change, but Jake could see the steel in her eyes. What's your assessment of the threat? The Korthic are known for their aggressive expansion tactics. Intelligence suggests they don't take prisoners and they don't negotiate. This is a complete extermination scenario. How long do we have? Less than 72 hours before their fleet arrives at the Zephyrian homeworld. Sullivan nodded slowly. Captain, I'm authorizing a full humanitarian fleet response. You're to proceed immediately to Zephyrian space and begin assessment of the situation. I'm mobilizing the Sol Defense Fleet and sending word to all sector commands. This is now a code-red humanitarian crisis. Jake felt his pulse quicken. He had never seen a code-red authorization before. It meant that humanity was committing to a full-scale military response to protect another species. Admiral, are you sure about this? We don't know these aliens, and the Korthic Empire is not our enemy, Ben Clark said quietly. Sullivan's voice was firm. Mr. Clark, let me make something clear. When innocent beings cry out for help, humanity answers. It doesn't matter if they're human or alien. It doesn't matter if we've never met them before. What matters is that they're facing extinction, and we have the power to help. Hayes nodded. Understood, Admiral. We'll proceed immediately to Zephyrian space. Captain, one more thing, Sullivan added. This isn't just about saving the Zephyrians. If we let the Korthic Empire expand unchecked, they'll eventually reach human space. We're not just protecting aliens today. We're protecting humanity's future. The communication ended and the bridge erupted into controlled chaos. Every station began working to prepare the ship for combat operations. Jake coordinated with the tactical department while Maria sent out the emergency call to all human vessels. In the region within minutes, responses began pouring in. The UES Harbinger, a heavy cruiser, was changing course to rendezvous with them. 3 destroyers from the Centauri system were also en route. Even civilian vessels were volunteering to help with refugee evacuation. Captain, Maria called out, I'm getting responses from vessels across 4 sectors. It looks like we're going to have quite a fleet, Hayes smiled grimly. Good. Signal the Zephyrians that help is coming. And let them know that when humans respond to a distress call, we don't send just one ship. As the Valiant changed course towards Zephyrian space, Jake couldn't help but think about what they were getting into. The Korthic Empire was powerful and ruthless, but they were about to learn something about humanity that might surprise them. When Deathworlders heard a cry for help, they didn't send assistance. They sent everything. The emergency alert spread through human space like wildfire. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood in the command center at Sol Station, watching as dozens of ship markers began moving on the tactical display. Each marker represented a human vessel changing course to respond to the Zephyrian crisis. Admiral, we have confirmation from the Mars Defense Fleet, reported Commander Amy Brooks from her station. They're deploying 6 destroyers and 2 heavy cruisers under Captain Tony Chun's command. Sullivan nodded, her eyes never leaving the display. What about the outer colonies? Centauri Command is sending everything they can spare. Europa Station is mobilizing their support fleet with medical supplies. Even the mining stations in the asteroid belt are sending their security vessels. The scope of the response was staggering. In less than 6 hours, humanity had begun the largest military mobilization in its history, not to defend human worlds, but to protect an alien species they had never met. Captain Tony Chun stood on the bridge of the UES Harbinger, watching his crew prepare for departure. The massive dreadnought was the pride of the Mars fleet, armed with enough firepower to level a small moon. But today it would be used to protect life, not destroy it. Captain, we have word from the civilian fleet, his communications officer reported. Merchant vessels from 6 systems are volunteering to help with evacuation efforts, Chun smiled. This was what he loved about humanity. When faced with a crisis, they didn't ask what was in it for them, they asked how they could help. Tell them to rendezvous with us at coordinates 447 Alpha. We'll need every ship we can get. Meanwhile, on the mining station Series 7, Sam Turner was preparing his freighter for the journey to Zephyrian space. The old ship wasn't much to look at, but she was fast and had plenty of cargo space for refugees. Sam, you sure about this? Asked his engineer, Pete Collins. We're talking about flying into a war zone. Turner checked his navigation console. One more time? Pete, imagine if it was Earth under threat. Imagine if aliens were coming to wipe out every human being on the planet. Wouldn't you want someone out there to help? Pete nodded slowly. Yeah, I guess I would. Then we go. Simple as that. Across human space, similar conversations were taking place. On every world, every station, every ship, humans were making the same choice. They were going to help regardless of the cost. Dr. Helen Wright worked frantically in her laboratory aboard the UES Harbinger. As the fleet's chief xenobiologist, she had been tasked with learning everything possible about the Zephyrians before they arrived. The information was limited, but what she found was fascinating. Computer, display all available data on Zephyrian. Biology, she commanded. The holographic display showed a humanoid species with elongated limbs and large eyes. Their skin had a blue-green tint, and they appeared to be herbivorous. But the most interesting aspect was their brain structure. Computer, analyze neural pathway configuration. The analysis revealed something remarkable. The Zephyrians literally lacked the brain structures necessary for aggressive behavior. They weren't pacifists by choice. They were biologically incapable of violence. My God, Helen whispered. They're completely defenseless. She immediately sent her findings to Admiral Sullivan and every fleet commander. The humans weren't just protecting a peaceful species. They were protecting a species that couldn't even comprehend the concept of warfare on the Zephyrian homeworld. Zephyr Yulan watched the sky with growing despair. The Korthik fleet was still hours away, but their advanced scouts had already been detected by the planet's sensors. His people were gathering in the cities, seeking comfort in numbers, but there was little comfort to be found. Zeph Prime, called his aide Zeph Minor Kale. We're receiving more transmissions from the humans. Yulan turned to the communication console. The alien voices were strange but somehow reassuring. What are they saying? They're sending us fleet compositions and arrival times. It appears they're mobilizing hundreds of ships. Yulan couldn't believe what he was hearing. Hundreds? But we've never even met these humans. Why would they risk so much for us? Kale shook his head. I don't understand it either. Their response is completely illogical from the strategic standpoint. They gain nothing from helping us. But even as they spoke, human ships were arriving in their sector. The first to arrive was a small patrol vessel, followed by a squadron of destroyers. Then came the larger ships, cruisers, battleships, and massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed anything the Zephyrians had ever seen. Commander Amy Brooks led her destroyer squadron into Zephyrian space, her tactical displays showing the positions of both human and alien vessels. All ships, maintain formation. We're here to establish a defensive perimeter around the Zephyrian homeworld. Her tactical officer, Lieutenant Ryan Kelly, studied the sensor readings. Commander, I'm picking up Korthek. Scout ships on the edge of the system. They're keeping their distance, but they're definitely watching us. Let them watch, Brooks replied. I want them to see exactly what they're up against. The human fleet continued to grow. Admiral Sullivan had authorized the deployment of 3 full battle groups plus support vessels from across human space. The civilian fleet was equally impressive, with dozens of merchant vessels and passenger ships ready to evacuate. Zephyrian civilians, if necessary. Colonel Steve Parker stood in the shuttle bay of the UES Leviathan, watching his Marines prepare their equipment. The 1st Orbital Marine Division was humanity's elite fighting force, and they were ready for anything the Korthik could throw at them. Listen up, Marines, Parker addressed his troops. We're not fighting for territory today. We're not fighting for resources or political gain. We're fighting because innocent people are about to die, and we're the only ones who can stop it. And the Marines responded with a unified "Ura!" Their training had prepared them for combat, but their humanity had prepared them for this moment. Back on the Valiant, Jake Morrison monitored the growing fleet with amazement. Ships were arriving from every corner of human space, each one adding to their defensive capabilities. The Korthak had expected to face a defenseless species, but instead they would encounter the full might of human civilization. "Captain," Maria Rodriguez called out from her station, "we're receiving a transmission from the Korthak fleet. They're demanding to know why we're interfering." Captain Hayes smiled grimly. "Tell them we're here because someone asked for help, and when humans hear a cry for help, we answer." The message was transmitted to the Korthak fleet, but Jake doubted they would understand. The concept of helping strangers without personal gain was apparently foreign to them. As the human fleet took positions around the Zephyrian homeworld, Jake realized they were about to demonstrate something important to the galaxy. Humanity had emerged from a dangerous world, had fought countless wars, and had developed the most advanced military in known space. But they hadn't used that power for conquest or domination. They had used it to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. The Korthak Empire was about to learn that when Deathworlders responded to a distress call, they didn't send help. They sent everything necessary to eliminate the threat completely. The Korthak invasion fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zephyrian system with the confidence of predators approaching helpless prey. War Commander Thrax stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Bloodfang, expecting to see a defenseless world ripe for conquest. Instead, his sensors showed something that made his blood run cold. "War Commander," his sensor officer hissed, "there are unknown vessels surrounding the target world. Dozens of them." Thrax studied the tactical display with growing confusion. The ships were clearly not Zephyrian. They were angular, aggressive-looking vessels that radiated danger even at this distance. "What species are they?" "Unknown, War Commander. But they're broadcasting a message on all frequencies." "Put it through." A human voice filled the bridge, speaking in clear universal standard. "This is Commander Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Valiant. You are entering Zephyrian space under hostile intent. Turn around now, and no harm will come to you. Continue your approach, and we will defend this world with everything we have." Thrax laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Humans, I've heard of this species. They call themselves Deathworlders, but they're just another weak civilization pretending to be strong." He opened a channel to respond. "Human Commander, I am War Commander Thrax of the Korthak Empire. You have no business here. These creatures are our prey, not yours." Jake Morrison's voice came back immediately, calm but with an edge of steel. "War Commander, let me make something clear. We don't view other species as prey. We view them as people who deserve to live in peace. The Zephyrians have asked for our help, and we're going to give it to them." "Why?" Thrax demanded. "What do you gain from protecting these weaklings?" "They have no technology you need, no resources you want. Your involvement makes no sense." There was a pause before Morrison answered, "Because it's the right thing to do." Thrax stared at the communication console in disbelief. In all his years of conquest, he had never encountered a species that fought for such a reason. Every other civilization he had faced fought for territory, resources, or survival. This concept of fighting simply because it was right was completely alien to him. "You're lying," Thrax snarled. "No species fights without gain. Tell me what you really want." "We want you to leave," Morrison replied simply. "We want you to go back to your empire and find something better to do with your time than murdering innocent people." The communication ended, and Thrax stood in silence for a moment. His tactical officers waited for orders, but he was trying to process what he had just heard. These humans claimed to be fighting for moral reasons, but that was impossible. No species was that altruistic. "War Commander," his tactical officer reported, "we're detecting more human vessels arriving in the system. Their fleet is growing." Thrax looked at the display and felt his confidence wavering. The human fleet was already impressive, but more ships were arriving every few minutes. "How many vessels do they have?" "At least 50, War Commander." "Possibly more." and they're positioning themselves in a defensive formation around the planet. This was not what Thrax had expected. The intelligence reports about humans had described them as aggressive but scattered, more interested in fighting each other than cooperating. This level of coordination and commitment was completely unexpected. All ships, advance to attack formation, Thrax commanded. If these humans want to die for strangers, we'll give them that opportunity. The Korthak fleet moved forward, their weapons charging and shields powering up. They had superior numbers and had conquered dozens of worlds. A few human ships wouldn't stop them. On the bridge of the Valiant, Jake Morrison watched the Korthak fleet approach with grim determination. Captain Hayes had given him tactical command of the first wave of defenders, and he was ready to show these invaders what humans were capable of. All ships, this is Morrison, he broadcast to the human fleet. Remember, we're not just fighting for ourselves today. We're fighting for people who can't fight for themselves. Make every shot count. The human fleet moved into position with practiced efficiency. Captain Lisa Hayes had positioned the Valiant and 5 other ships in the asteroid field that surrounded the Zephyrian homeworld. It was a defensive position that would allow them to use the asteroids as cover while forcing the Korthak to come to them. "Sir," reported Ben Clark from the tactical station, "the Korthak fleet is moving to attack formation. 37 vessels, including what appears to be a Dreadnought-class command ship." "Understood," Jake replied. "Signal the fleet. Engage. Only when they enter the asteroid field, let them come to us." The first Korthak ships entered the asteroid field with weapons blazing. They expected the humans to break and run, but instead they found themselves facing a coordinated defense that used every asteroid and debris. Fueled to maximum advantage. Lieutenant Sarah Kim piloted her fighter through the asteroid field with deadly precision. She had grown up on Luna, where 3-dimensional thinking was a survival skill. The Korthak pilots, used to fighting in open space, struggled to adapt to the chaotic environment. "Viper 2, this is Viper Lead," she called to her wingman. "I'm seeing confusion in their formation. They're not used to fighting in tight spaces." "Copy that, Viper Lead. These rocks are working in our favor." Sarah dove through a gap between 2 asteroids, her fighter's weapons tracking a Korthak cruiser that was trying to navigate around a particularly large rock. The human weapons were more accurate, designed for precision rather than raw power. When she fired, her shots found their mark. The Korthak ship exploded in a brilliant flash, its wreckage scattering among the asteroids. But Sarah was already moving to her next target, her fighter dancing through the debris field with an agility that the Korthak pilots couldn't match. On the Bloodfang, War Commander Thrax watched his carefully planned attack fall apart. The humans were using tactics he had never seen before. They turned the asteroid field into a weapon, using the rocks as shields and forcing his ships into vulnerable positions. "War Commander," his tactical officer reported, "we've lost 6 ships already. The humans are fighting differently than expected." "How so?" "They're not trying to destroy our entire fleet. They're targeting our ability to attack the planet. Every shot is precise, calculated. They're fighting to protect, not to conquer." Thrax realized his officer was right. The humans weren't fighting like conquerors. They were fighting like guardians, and that made them far more dangerous than he had anticipated. "All ships, pull back to the edge of the system," he ordered. "We need to regroup and call for reinforcements." As the Korthak fleet retreated, Jake Morrison allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The first battle was won, but he knew it was far from over. The Korthak would be back, and next time they would bring more ships. "All ships, hold position," he broadcast. "Stay alert, they'll be back." On the Zephyrian homeworld, Zephyr Prime Yulan watched the battle with amazement. The humans had fought with a ferocity he had never seen, but it was controlled, directed. They fought not for glory or conquest, but for protection. "Zeph Prime," his aide reported, "the humans are requesting permission to establish defensive installations on our outer moons." Yulan nodded. "Tell them they have our complete cooperation. After what we've seen today, I trust them completely." The humans had shown the galaxy something new. When Deathworlders heard a cry for help, they didn't just send assistance, they sent everything necessary to ensure the threat could never return. The arrival of Admiral Kate Sullivan's main battle fleet was a sight that would be remembered throughout the galaxy for generations to come. 200 human vessels dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the deadly beauty of humanity's finest warships. Admiral Sullivan stood on the bridge of her flagship, the UES Leviathan, watching as her fleet took defensive positions around the Zephyrian homeworld. Captain Paul Anderson, her flag captain, coordinated the massive deployment with the precision of a master conductor directing an orchestra. "Admiral," reported the communications officer, "we're receiving status reports from all fleet elements. The Centauri battle group has established defensive positions on the system's outer edge. The Mars fleet is setting up a secondary perimeter around the planet. Civilian vessels are beginning evacuation procedures for non-essential Zephyrian personnel." Sullivan nodded, her eyes never leaving the tactical display. "What's the status of the Korthic fleet?" "They're regrouping at the edge of the system, Admiral. Long-range sensors indicate they're calling for reinforcements." "How many reinforcements?" "Unknown, but we're detecting hyperspace signatures suggesting a much larger force is en route." Sullivan had expected this. The Korthic Empire wouldn't accept defeat easily, especially not from a species they had never encountered before. They would send everything they had to crush this unexpected resistance. On the surface of the Zephyrian homeworld, Dr. Helen Wright worked with Zephyrian scientists to establish better communication protocols. The aliens were fascinating to study. But more importantly, they needed to understand human military procedures to stay safe during the coming battle. "Dr. Wright," said Zeph scientist Nala, her translator device converting her melodic language into English, "we don't understand why your people are doing this. You risk so much for beings you've never met." Helen looked up from her work. "That's what makes us human, I suppose. We can't stand by and watch innocent people suffer when we have the power to help. But your fleet could be destroyed. Your people could die." "Yes, they could," Helen agreed. "But if we don't fight for what's right, then what kind of people are we?" Nala's large eyes showed confusion and wonder. Her species had evolved beyond violence, but they had also evolved beyond the concept of sacrifice for others. The human willingness to risk everything for strangers was completely outside their experience. Meanwhile, Colonel Steve Parker's Marines were busy establishing defensive positions on the planet's surface. The Zephyrians had no military infrastructure, so the humans had to build everything from scratch. Automated defense turrets, shield generators, and communication arrays sprouted across the planet's major cities like technological flowers. "Colonel," reported Sergeant Mike Torres, "the Zephyrians are having trouble understanding our defensive strategies. They keep asking why we don't just evacuate everyone instead of fighting." Parker nodded. "It's their nature, Sergeant. They literally can't comprehend why anyone would choose to fight. But that's why we're here. Someone has to stand between them and the monsters." The human fleet's deployment was a masterpiece of military engineering. Admiral Sullivan had implemented what humans called Protocol Omega, a defensive strategy designed specifically for protecting a civilian population against overwhelming odds. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier was positioned to maximize the protection of the Zephyrian homeworld. Captain Tony Shun commanded the heavy battle line from his dreadnought, the UES Harbinger. His massive ship carried enough firepower to level a continent, but today it would be used to shield innocent lives. Around him, the other capital ships of the human fleet formed a wall of steel and energy that no enemy could easily break. "Captain," his tactical officer reported, "we're detecting massive hyperspace distortions at the edge of the system. Something big is coming." Hyun studied the sensor readings with growing concern. "How big?" "Sir, I'm reading signatures for over 100 vessels. This is their main fleet." The news spread quickly through the human fleet. The Korthic Empire was bringing its full military might to bear on the Zephyrian system. War Commander Thrax had apparently convinced his superiors that the human presence represented a serious threat to their expansion plans. "Hi, Warlord Gracchus stood on the bridge of his massive flagship, the Devastator, as his fleet prepared to enter the Zephyrian system. He was the supreme military commander of the Korthic Empire, and he had never lost a battle. The idea that a handful of unknown aliens could challenge his forces was personally insulting. War Commander Thrax, he growled to his subordinate, explain to me how you lost 6 ships to these humans. Thrax bowed his head in shame. High Warlord, they fight unlike any species we've encountered. They use the environment as a weapon, and they coordinate their attacks with impossible precision. But more than that, they fight with a determination I've never seen. They seem willing to die for these Zephyrians. Willing to die for strangers? Gracchus laughed, a sound like breaking glass. That's not determination. That's madness. No rational species would sacrifice itself for others. Perhaps, High Warlord, but their madness makes them dangerous. Gracchus studied the tactical display, showing the human fleet deployment. Over 200 vessels in perfect defensive formation, positioned to protect every approach to the planet. It was an impressive sight, but his own fleet numbered over 300 ships, including some of the most powerful vessels the Korthic Empire had ever built. All ships, advance to attack formation, he commanded. We'll crush these mad humans and show the galaxy what happens to those who interfere with the Korthic Empire. As the Korthic fleet moved into the system, alarms began sounding throughout the human fleet. This was it. The real battle was about to begin. Admiral Sullivan activated the fleet-wide communication system. All ships, this is Admiral Sullivan. Today we face an enemy that sees mercy as weakness and compassion as madness. They cannot understand why we would risk our lives for people we've never met. That incomprehension is their weakness and our strength. She paused, looking at the tactical display showing both fleets moving toward collision. We are not fighting for territory today. We are not fighting for resources or political advantage. We are fighting because it is right. We are fighting because someone asked for help, and humans always answer that call. The response from the fleet was immediate and unanimous. Every ship, every crew, every individual human in the fleet was ready to fight and die for the Zephyrians. It was what made them human. Captain Paul Anderson coordinated the final defensive preparations. All batteries prepare for engagement. Fighter squadrons launch when ready. This is going to be the biggest space battle in human history. On the Zephyrian homeworld, billions of peaceful beings watched the sky and prayed to whatever deities they believed in. They knew that their fate was about to be decided in the cold darkness of space by warriors from a distant world who had chosen to protect them. High Warlord Gracchus was about to learn something that would shake the foundations of his empire. When Deathworlders heard a cry for help, they didn't send assistance. They sent everything necessary to ensure the threat could never return, and they were willing to sacrifice everything to see it through. The final battle began with a silence that stretched across the void of space. 2 mighty fleets faced each other across the Zephyrian system, each representing a completely different vision of what civilization should be. The Korthic Empire brought conquest and domination. Humanity brought protection and sacrifice. Admiral Kate Sullivan watched from the bridge of the Leviathan as the Korthic fleet approached in perfect attack formation. High Warlord Gracchus had arranged his ships in the classic Korthic battle wedge, designed to punch through enemy lines and spread chaos among defending forces. It was a formation that had conquered dozens of worlds. All ships maintain defensive positions, Sullivan commanded. Let them come to us. Make them fight on our terms. Captain Paul Anderson coordinated the human response with calm efficiency. Fighter Squadrons Alpha through Delta launch and engage enemy scouts. Capital ships hold fire until they reach optimal range. We want every shot to count. The space between the fleets erupted with the dance of fighters and interceptors. Lieutenant Sarah Kim led her squadron through the void with deadly grace, her pilots moving like a school of fish through 3-dimensional space. The Korthic fighters were powerful but clumsy, designed for attacking helpless civilians rather than fighting trained military pilots. Viper lid to all fighters, Sarah broadcast. Remember your training. These pilots have never faced real opposition. Use their overconfidence against them. Her words proved prophetic. The Korthik pilots attacked with the arrogance of those who had never met their equals, only to find themselves outmaneuvered and outgunned by humans who had learned their skills in the deadly void around Earth. On the Devastator, High Warlord. Gracchus watched his fighter screen being systematically destroyed with growing anger. How are these humans so effective? Our pilots are experienced warriors. War Commander Thrax studied the tactical displays with newfound respect for their enemies. High Warlord, I believe we underestimated them. These humans fight like they were born in the void. Every movement is calculated, every attack coordinated. They're not just soldiers, they're apex predators. Impossible, Gracchus snarled. No species is that naturally gifted at warfare. Perhaps not naturally, High Warlord. But they come from a world that tried to kill them for millions of years. They learned to fight by fighting for survival every day of their existence. As the fighter battle raged, the main fleets closed to weapons range. Admiral Sullivan had positioned her ships in layers, with the fastest destroyers and cruisers forming the outer shell and the massive dreadnoughts anchoring the defensive line. It was a formation designed to absorb punishment while delivering devastating counterattacks. All ships, weapons free, Sullivan commanded. Show them what happens when you threaten innocent people. The human fleet opened fire with controlled fury. Every weapon had been carefully targeted, every shot designed to maximum effect. The Korthak had expected the chaotic melee that characterized most space battles, but the humans fought with surgical precision, Captain Tony Chun's Harbinger led. The capital ship engagement, its massive guns speaking with the voice of righteous anger. Each shot from the dreadnought's main batteries could destroy a cruiser, and Qing's gunners had trained for scenarios exactly like this. Target their command ships, Chun ordered. Cut off their coordination and the rest will fall apart. The Korthak fleet found itself facing something they had never encountered before. An enemy that was not only willing to die for others but was also better at warfare than they were. The humans used every advantage their technology and training could provide, but more than that, they fought with a unity of purpose that the conquest-minded Korthak could never achieve. High Warlord, Gracchus watched his carefully planned assault crumble as human tactics proved superior at every level. His ships were being destroyed faster than they could inflict damage. His pilots were being outfought by enemies who seemed to anticipate their every move. All ships, concentrate fire on their flagship, he commanded desperately. If we can break their command structure, we can still win this. But Admiral Sullivan had anticipated this move. As the Korthik fleet converged on the Leviathan, the rest of the human fleet closed in from all sides like the jaws of a massive trap. The Korthak found themselves surrounded, their superior numbers meaningless in the confined space of the inner system. The turning point came when a squadron of Korthak ships attempted to break through the human lines and attack the Zephyrian homeworld directly. This triggered something in the human fleet that the Korthak had not expected. Protective rage. Commander Amy Brooks led her destroyer squadron in a charge that defied all military logic. Her ships dove straight into the heart of the Korthik formation, their weapons blazing with desperate fury. It should have been suicide, but the human crews fought with a determination that transcended tactical considerations. "This is Brooks to all ships," she broadcast on an open channel. "They're trying to get through to the planet. Not on our watch, not today, not ever." Her destroyers carved through the Korthik formation like knives through paper, their crews fighting with the knowledge that innocent lives hung in the balance. The Korthak ships, designed for attacking the defenseless, couldn't handle opponents who fought back with such ferocity. On the surface of the Zephyrian homeworld, Zephyr Milan watched the battle through his planet's sensors. The scale of the human sacrifice was beyond his comprehension. These beings from a distant world were dying to protect people they had never met, and they were doing it without hesitation. "Zeph Prime," his aide reported, "the humans are requesting permission to establish permanent defense stations in our system." "Tell them yes," Ylan replied immediately. "Tell them they have our eternal gratitude and our complete trust." The battle reached its climax when High Warlord Gracchus, seeing his fleet being systematically destroyed, made a final desperate gambit. He ordered his flagship to ram the Leviathan, hoping to take Admiral Sullivan down with him, but Captain Paul Anderson had been watching for exactly this move. As the Devastator began its suicide run, every human ship in range concentrated their fire on the massive Korthic dreadnought. The combined firepower of a dozen capital ships tore the enemy, flagship apart before it could reach its target. High Warlord Gracchus died, still not understanding what he had faced. To his last moment, he could not comprehend a species that would sacrifice everything to protect strangers. With their command ship destroyed and their fleet in ruins, the surviving Korthic vessels began to retreat. But Admiral Sullivan was not content to simply win the battle. She authorized Operation Sanctuary, a massive campaign to hunt down the remaining Korthic forces and protect other species in the region. "All ships, pursue and destroy," she commanded. "We're not just protecting the Zephyrians today. We're sending a message to every aggressor in the galaxy. Innocent people are under human protection now." The human fleet split into task forces, each one heading to a different system where Korthic forces threatened civilian populations. The war that had begun with a simple distress call was expanding into something much larger: humanity's first intervention as Galactic Protectors. Jake Morrison, now promoted to Admiral for his role in the initial defense, remained in the Zephyrian space to establish the first joint human-alien defense fleet. As he watched human and Zephyrian technicians working together to build defensive installations, he reflected on what they had accomplished. The Korthic Empire had learned a hard lesson about humanity. When Deathworlders heard a cry for help, they didn't send assistance. They sent everything necessary to ensure the threat could never return, and they were willing to sacrifice everything to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. The galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had announced its presence not as conquerors but as guardians, and that made all the difference.